What's going on, YouTube friends and family? Welcome back to the channel. Hope you are all doing very well. I'm doing great. It's just been a very busy time of year for me, so I'm trying to keep the content as consistent as possible, but every once in a while you're going to see a brief delay because that's just life, right? So I have a subscriber requested episode. Someone wanted me to do like a breakdown of the weekly fragrances that I wear. So I've been keeping notes, and even though this is 2 weeks back, and I think I tried to post a short video of it, the titles and the dates got messed up, and the song I chose, even though it was approved and I got it from YouTube, the short was demonetized, so I just deleted the video. I didn't want to strike against my channel. I'm not really sure how that works. So I just deleted it and figured I'd do things the old-fashioned way, which is regular video. So we got Boadicea Green Sapphire that I wore on Monday. These are all in order, so Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Now, some of these I chose for different reasons, and I'll get into that in a second, but Green Sapphire that I chose from Boadicea the Victorious, I just chose because it was a newer fragrance that I had purchased. I haven't worn it that much. It seemed like a great time to do it. And man, every single time I put this fragrance on skin, it makes me appreciate it more and more for what it is. I mean, man, the density and the freshness combined must have been very hard to achieve for the House of Boadicea and the perfumer Christian Provenzano. Very heavy on the oud. It's like a Middle Eastern version, and I've said this in my single review of this. It reminds me of a Middle Eastern version, a very high quality version of Creed's Green Irish Tweed, and it's not a clone of it at all. I'm just trying to compare it to something that's been around for a long time that people may have smelled and realized. In fact, the notes are not even the same. I mean, Green Irish Tweed, I think it's got like lemon and verbena at the top. It's got ambergris at the base. But just in terms of the green, fresh vibe that it gives you, kind of that outdoor, proper, masculine, gentleman's vibe. This is a lot heavier on the wood. And of course it has the ingredient of oud in here. And like I said with a lot of Boadicea the Victoriouses, not only does Boadicea the Victorious have a lot of oud as notes in their fragrances, so they use a lot of oud in quite a few of their fragrances, but it's the amount of oud that they actually put in them. And there's a lot of fragrance companies, I'm not gonna get into names. There's a lot of them that will say oud, and it's usually a fake or a synthetic type of oud, or they'll say that they have oud in the fragrance, and they're probably not even using a quarter of a milliliter in the entire structure of the fragrance. And I don't know exactly how much Boadicea is using, but it's a lot more than a lot of other brands, which may help justify the price. But yeah, when they say that they have oud in a fragrance, for the most part, everything that I smelled from Boadicea so far, when they put oud as a note, you get the smell of oud, and it's definitely a real oud. Man, so dense, earthy, rich, slightly smoky, with the cedar and the pine and the oud, very heavy wood notes. You can't get around that, very dense, so it may not be a fragrance for you if you don't like that. It's got raspberry at the top notes, which really give it a nice kind of freshness too. But I don't know if I would personally pick out raspberry unless I read it as an ingredient. It's not a fruity fragrance, if that makes any sense, but just very complex, and it gets better on skin and it gets better as it dries down. And that's the only thing I can say. If you have not tried Green Sapphire yet, maybe it's worth it to get a decant or a sample if you can find it. I believe it is out of stock on Boadicea's website. Last I checked, that may have changed. But yeah, if you haven't gotten your hands on Boadicea the Victorious Green Sapphire, that's just an incredible fragrance. It really is. Now, Argos Brevido Delicacia for Tuesday. Brevido Delicacia is one of my favorite fragrances from the House of Argos. When it comes to green fragrances, one of the best ones they make, Neiman Lion, I would consider a green fragrance as well, just because of the notes that it has in there. But this one in particular, man, Brevido with the oil of Fluvet, the birch, the leather, the sage. It's got some juniper in there and have a little bit of sweetness coming through as well, some juniper berry. Pink peppercorn. I think it's got, I know it's got sage in there. It may have cardamom. I may be wrong on that, but I know it has sage in there. So you get a really nice herbal note to this as well. It's just amazing, man. It's fresh, woody, green, outdoors, a little bit sweet, but it's still masculine. You can tell how much I've used of this 30 ml bottle. And as I get closer to the end of summer, this is probably gonna be all the way gone, maybe halfway gone. I'm not sure how much I'm going to use of it, but I will definitely be getting 100 ml of Brevido Delicacia from Argos. when this starts running lower. Just a great fragrance. It's complex, but it's also easy to grab and go for summer and springtime. So it's not one of those fragrances where you have to overthink it. It's some ways mass appealing because it's not really any one or two notes in there that would make somebody stand off of it, but it's more, unique than mass appealing while still, having a good compliment factor and not being too weird of a scent, if that makes any sense. So really good job by Argos. I love Bravito. The first one I tried from the house, and it's still one of my favorites, regardless of everything else that they put out. Definitely in my top 5 or 7 from them. And it's just hard to get away from it. It's just a very easy scent to wear, very pleasing, and the women seem to love it as well. So if you're looking for compliments, that's another really good one. Now the major outlier on Wednesday, when you look at all these fragrances here, the major outlier that I wore was Bocanera on Wednesday, and mainly I did that is because I was wanting to wear a gourmand fragrance, but I didn't want something too sweet. I have New Harlem, I have Chocolate Makes Me Happy. I got some really good gourmand fragrances, but there's a reason I save those for cooler weather or the winter time. Sometimes in the heat and on skin, they can just get overly sweet, which isn't always a bad thing, but I was looking for something a little more masculine, a little more complex, and not quite as sweet. And Bocanera, again, it reminds me of a good mole sauce. It's got the chocolate, the spices in there, slightly woody, a lot of depth in there. I think it's got musk, tonka bean, and vanilla in the base notes, so you get some good longevity out of this as well. And it's just a proper smelling fragrance. It really is. It's masculine, slightly gourmand. They just did a great job with Bocanera, and it was nice to wear that as a change of pace, because if you see the pattern here, we kind of got all these green fragrances, then we start going to blue. We'll kind of get into that as we go along, but that week in particular, the week I'm going over now, really seemed to be heavy on the green fragrances, and that's no exception when I get to Novu Bowery. I wore it on Thursday. Lime, thyme, basil, Italian mandarin, violet wood, oak moss. There's just nothing not to like about this fragrance if you're into that sort of thing. I mean, it's very, very natural smelling. You can see the coloration there as well. They've done a great job of using natural raw materials and aroma chemicals, kind of blending them all together. It's a very classic masculine scent. I don't know exactly what it reminds me of, but it just reminds me of something that a man would wear maybe back in the 60s or 70s. You didn't have to look around the room to know a man walked in the room. You spray this on heavy, you walk in, and people know it's a cologne. They know it's a man, even though this is done at a eau de parfum concentration somewhere between 20 and 25%. Great longevity and projection, but yeah, this is not unisex at all in my opinion. It's just very green, masculine, strong. The lime and the Italian mandarin really give this a beautiful, sweet, acidic citrus note. Obviously you can't, but this smells good enough to drink. With the lime and the mandarin in there, it smells very citrusy, very, very, I wouldn't say fruity, even though of course those are citrus fruits, but it's just very strong and acidic, blended with those green and herbal notes. This is just one of my favorite fragrances from Bond Number 9. Doesn't get the attention that it deserves, and that's just fine with me. Next we got Friday. I wore Lyric Man from the House of Mouage. Now this is interesting fragrance. I've always compared this to kind of like a Middle Eastern blue fragrance with the pine, the frankincense. It has lime in there as well. Rose, orange blossom, slightly powdery, slightly floral. It's got pine as well. So you get a very nice mix of some fresh, strong notes in there. It's very difficult to describe this one because it does smell like it's leaning to a blue direction, but it also smells floral and powdery. And I don't really like powdery fragrances, but this one has the balance just right to where it's not overly done in any one area. And Lyric Man is just a wonderful fragrance. In fact, I had some older samples. I liked the older samples a lot, but they were a little bit more floral. This seems to have a little bit more pine and frankincense in there, which makes me think that the new one, even though it's 99% the exact same, the new one I seem to like a little bit better, and that's just me personally because it does remind me slightly more of a blue fragrance, where the old samples that I had seem to be slightly more rose heavy and even more powdery than the new one. Again, with the extra pine and the frankincense. And the new one, it just seems to be very slightly different. Again, I'm just kind of picking and choosing here. They're very, very similar between the old one and the new one and the new packaging, but I actually think I personally like the new one better. If I didn't, could have easily gone out and bought some of the old packaging. There's still some out there on secondary markets. So just wonderful stuff by Amouage by keeping up the quality with their new packaging as well. Some of the batches are also the exact same as the old ones. I remember them saying that. I believe it was on Al Jazeera. They did an episode about that. And Amouage actually had to change their packaging in the middle of bottling because they're having so many counterfeit issues. So it's really funny when people complain about the new packaging. Some of the new packaging, depending on where they were in the bottling process, is the exact same as the old batches in the old boxes. So the reason they changed the packaging was they were just having a ton of counterfeit issues in the Middle East and Europe. And I don't know how much of that made its way to America, but it's an international world, international market, so it very well could have. So it's good that they dealt with that, and they'll probably be changing packaging again in a year or two because that's just how the world works. People are going to copy it again. So on Saturday, I wore 40 knots from the House of Xerjoff. Great house, especially for blue fragrances. They got a lot of good blue fragrances, and I've tried pretty much every single one, and I still like 40 knots the best. That's why I decided to buy a large bottle of it. There's just something about this, especially the way it goes on my skin. Beautiful fragrance, slightly marine, slightly metallic, a little bit of that like salty white floral note as well. Definitely a little bit powdery, but again, I'm not a huge fan of powdery fragrances. As long as it's not, overdone, I will buy something. Even Lyric Man and 40 Knots both kind of go that slightly powdery direction, but it's not overdone, so I'm okay with it. Again, a very sweet note to it. For me, I've said this before, it almost smells like a cognac or an Armagnac reduction when you reduce it on the stove. All the alcohol is burnt off and you're just left with the residual oils and stuff from the Armagnac and the cognac without the alcohol and the water. It's got that type of sweetness, almost like a slightly like grapey, like a grape type of smell to it. I don't really know if anyone else has picked that up, but for me, I do get that along with the saltiness, the white florals, definitely some amber in the base as well. Very good stuff, man. And there's, I know some people try to compare 40 Knots to like some other designers. I don't know if it was Dior or something like that, but I've smelled some of the ones that people were talking about. I think it was something Dior Nuit, and that came out a long time ago. And it's so funny because when you have fragrances, if they share like one or two notes and they're heavy, then people are just automatically going, oh, they've cloned this or they've cloned that. And that's just really not true, especially when you wear them both on skin and compare them side to side. 40 Knots is definitely a very unique and a very well done fragrance. There's a reason it has such a good following to it. And some people may not like it for that reason, just because it is pretty popular for a niche fragrance, but I don't see a lot of people wearing 40 Knots anymore. There's just so many blue fragrances out there. I don't know if it's fallen out of favor, but I'm really glad I bought it when I did because I got a tester for like $160, full-size bottle, and man, I'm gonna be using this a lot this summer because it's a very well complemented fragrance, huge longevity and projection. In fact, one of the biggest complaints I hear about 40 Knots is that it's just too strong. So for me, that's a bonus when you're paying this type of money for these sorts of fragrances. You're better off having it too strong than not strong enough. If it's too strong, just spray less. I don't know what to tell you. People just find a way to complain no matter what. That's the funniest thing about the fragrance community, just people complain like nothing else I've ever seen. And this is coming from somebody that's been in the single malt scotch, the cigar industry, the bourbon industry, and never have I seen anybody complain about some minute stuff than people in the fragrance industry. It's pretty funny. So Jubilation 40, another one that's hit or miss for people. I personally love it. I'm glad I bought it. Not the best packaging from Amouage. If you ever want to watch that video, the packaging they sent it in for a direct purchase from the House of Amouage was just embarrassing for them. I get better carefully packaged items on eBay when I buy them, and this was a direct purchase from the House of Amouage, and they basically just threw it in a box and said, I don't care, here's your stuff. And for all I know, it could have broken in transit because there really was no protection. So I'm just glad it got here safe. But that's something you have to keep in mind when you order direct from Amouage. You may get something packaged and their level of caring is pretty low, it seems like. So hopefully they change that. But Jubilation 40 in general, I absolutely love it. I'm very happy that Bertrand Duchefauer, the guy who is the perfumer for this fragrance and also the original Jubilation 25 man, The fragrance DNA, I would say, is 95% the exact same with Jubilation Man, just done as a higher concentration. I believe this one, just from smelling it compared to the Jubilation 25 that I have, it's a little bit more woody. It's got a slight gourmand, like chestnut, walnut, maybe like roasted chestnut or walnut pecan, that type of kind of nuttiness going on. And I would say it's got a little bit more freshness to it. Like maybe it's got a little bit more rosemary, maybe a little bit more ambergris at the base as well. It's just more of everything of Jubilation 25 with a very slight twist on it. So if you like the original DNA of Jubilation Man 25 and you haven't had the 40 yet, it may be worth it to get a sample because it may be redundant in your collection. Now I usually wear the Jubilation 40 in cooler weather. That's where I save it for. And the Jubilation 25, I'll wear in a little bit warmer weather just because the oil concentration is lower. But this one I wore on Sunday mainly for the reason that I just didn't want to have to reapply. I knew I was going to be busy that day, so I put this on in the morning. And this stuff lasts all day, man. 16 to 20 hours. It's hard to ever give an accurate, projection or longevity. It is very subjective. People would like to say that it's this and it's only this. It really comes down to where do you spray the fragrance? How much of the fragrance do you spray? What is your own nose like? Some people go nose deaf to fragrances quicker than others. I haven't had problems with longevity with any of these fragrances. I spray, depending on the time of year and the fragrance, I'll spray like 6 to 8 sprays. That may be too much for some people. Again, that's the funny thing about projection and longevity. Some people may spray 2 sprays and they're like, oh, I only get 2 hours of projection. And they may be going nose deaf to it and other people can still smell it. Or you can have people that may spray 10 to 12 sprays that are extremely heavy sprayers and they're getting 20 to 24 hours of longevity and projection. So it really just depends on where you spray it. Are you spraying it on clothing? How much are you spraying? The time of year it is, your nose. That's why I never try to give specifics on longevity and projection because it is going to be different for everybody. But all these fragrances are pretty strong. I would say the strongest of them all, probably Green Sapphire from Boadicea, Bond Number 9 Novu Bowery, and of course you got the Amouage Jubilation 40 and 40 knots, all very strong, very powerful, huge projection and longevity for me. And the other ones still do very good, but those 4 are the strongest in my opinion. So hope to be able to do this a little bit more often, guys. I don't think I'm going to be able to do it every week just with my schedule, but now I'm in the habit of whenever I put on a fragrance, especially starting the week, I try to put it in the notes section of my phone so I can at least have somewhat of an organized, plan when I go into these videos, if I can reach back to it a week or 2 later, just to give you guys a breakdown of what I'm wearing each week. So I appreciate the recommendation from one of my subscribers. I'll be doing these as much as I'm, able to. I look forward to seeing you guys soon, all right? Bye.